It was an explosive case that, you had a coloured DJ from a poor part of Knysna, Hornley, accused of murdering 2 young white girls in one of the most popular tourist towns in South Africa.
And now you've got journalists all over the place, you've got media coverage on these 2 murders. You need to make an arrest. You need to get somebody convicted for this.
The peace of the small South African holiday town of Knysna was shattered in 2005 by the brutal murders of 2 young women. They were killed within weeks of each other, both in the early hours of the morning after leaving one of Knysna's popular nightclubs.
According to the information we got at the time, is that she was forced down and her face was forced into the soil where she had actually inhaled soil and she suffocated.
Both of them were strangled. Both of them were in a similar position, killed within a month of each other.
In the investigation of the first victim, Jessica Wheeler, the police seemed to make little headway. After a week, they still had made no arrests. Private detective Christian Botha then became involved in the case after alarm mounted in this small, tourist-dependent town.
I was contacted by a businessman who wanted to remain anonymous. He was concerned that this murder could affect business for himself, and also as a concerned citizen, he felt that he wanted to do something on his part.
At that stage, all that Christian Botha knew was that Jessica Wheeler's half-naked body had been found in the churchyard and that she appeared to have been sexually assaulted. Then the private detective seemed to get a lead in his investigation after a conversation with a local cop.
He was one of the first people at the scene when Jessica was found in the churchyard, and he told us he had observed a struggle zone, which means that he saw footprints in the struggle, the sand had been moved, and in these footprints he noticed 3 sets of shoe prints, and he observed Jessica Wheeler's shoes, which had nicely packed next to her body, which when it was found, and the soles of those matched one of the soles of the 3 sets found in the sand. He then marked the shoe print with sticks. A captain arrived at the scene and asked him to move off the scene. Later on he returned, he found that these shoe prints had been contaminated. They weren't there no longer. And he was quite angry because he realized that that's very important evidence which could be used at a later stage to link somebody to the scene.
But it was clear that something strange had happened in the churchyard in the early hours of the morning preceding the murder. Christian Botha then located a second witness. A woman who lived near the church had been awoken by a disturbance in the night.
What she could recall hearing was an argument. She heard a male's voice and then a girl's voice. And the one thing she heard was, "You betrayed me."
I did not betray you.
You betrayed me. You know it and I know it. Now I'm going to be in trouble.
Unfortunately, this woman didn't get up out of bed and go open the curtains and look. She would have had full view of the churchyard. So she went back to sleep.
You know it and I know it. Now I'm going to be in trouble.
So I tried to make sense of this. Who betrayed who? So we looked into who possibly could have betrayed Jessica, because that would give us a lead to who it was, or a possible motive.
Christian Botha tried to make sense of this, and he came to a surprising explanation. Could Jessica Wheeler have been leading a double life as a police informer on the drug scene in this small town? Could this have led to her murder?
It was claimed that she was a police informant This young white policeman, he was her handler. And the one night he had got drunk in a pub and he had made mention, revealed her as his informer. Now, to me, that's definitely betrayal.
Christian Botha was also told about a phone call made by Jessica Wheeler to a friend on the night of her murder.
We got information that a certain person had received a distress call on his cell phone, which he only picked up the following day.
Although the friend missed the call, he did have some other interesting information for the private detective, which seemed to confirm that there'd been an argument in the churchyard.
He started telling us something else about a young car guard who was about 16 years old at the time, told him that he had witnessed an event which took place in the churchyard.
I can't believe that you did this. Do you know how much danger I'm going to be in? Because everybody will know.
Calm down, calm down. It's not such a big deal.
It's a big deal to me. You betrayed me.
Shut the fuck up. It's not my fault.
You betrayed me. You know it and I know it. Now I'm going to be in trouble.
He observed a woman, matching the description of Jessica Wheeler, standing in the churchyard with two other gentlemen. And he stressed the one was a bald guy and the other one as this young white policeman. So we found some sort of betrayal between what the car guard, who he placed at the scene, who he witnessed to be at the scene, to a betrayal.
Not even a month had passed when another young woman went missing. She too was last seen leaving a downtown club, accompanied by a local DJ in her white VW Golf. Hanneke Stadler, mother of the 20-year-old Victoria, could not reach her daughter the next day.
Me and Victoria, we had contact every day. What she normally do is, still if I can hear it, 10 o'clock in the morning, she will give me a missed call. Then I must phone her back. Then 10 o'clock in the morning, she didn't phone. I think to myself, that's strange.
Early that same morning, reports of a wildfire had started reaching the town. The police investigated and discovered a burnt-out VW Golf, but made no connection to the missing girl.
The police arrived, the fire department put the fire out, and that was that. They just left afterwards. No one took the chassis number of the vehicle or anything to establish ownership.
At her home, thousands of kilometers away, Victoria's mother was starting to get desperate. She phoned her daughter's friends, hoping that Victoria was with them.
I phoned Bronwyn and I asked, where's Victoria? She's not answering her phone. She said, no, Victoria went out last night. She didn't want to go with, and she went to Stones. I said, did you go to the police? Yes. What did the police say? No, we must wait 48 hours before we can report a person missing.
But Victoria's mother and friends were poorly advised. There's no minimum required time for reporting a missing person in South Africa.
The next day, they give me a number, and I think the constable's name was Kasselman. And I phoned him, and I said, but my child is missing, He said, no, but maybe they were friends or something like that. I said, Victoria is missing. I'm telling you, my child is missing.
Victoria's friends said they'd last seen her leaving a local nightclub at around 2 in the morning with the DJ. Fearing the worst, Hanneke Stadler decided to travel to Knysna from her home in the north of the country to look for her daughter herself. She also enlisted the help of a high-profile private investigator from Pretoria.
Mrs. Stadler contacted me and said to me her daughter disappeared It was out of character because she had daily communications with her. When she realized that there was no communication more than 12 hours, we were already on it.
Mike Bullhuis dispatched one of his investigators to Knysna immediately.
When I arrived there on the Monday, he was also there. né? And he waited for me and he said he wants the car registration number. He wants everything what I can give of Victoria, photos of her ID and things like that. So I did give it to them and they started immediately with their investigation. Up until that stage, nothing of the police. Nothing, nothing, nothing.
She had been missing for a couple of days. Her face was in the paper. There was a report about her disappearance.
The investigator is an experienced missing persons as well as a murder investigator. He just started track and tracing last moves, and he started doing all the interviews, previous boyfriends, friends, flatmates, other ladies that worked with her and patrons of the nightclub.
5 days later, the people started realizing, wait a minute, that Golf, let's go and check that Golf, because there's a missing persons report with a young girl in a white Golf. And that's when they found that the car was actually registered to Vicky Stadler, the missing girl.
Mike Bullhuis phoned me and he said, where am I? I said, did the police contact me? I said, no. He said to me, get in your car and get back, because they found Victoria's car burned out.
The police alerted my investigator, went to the scene. We were quite adamant in getting people away and unnecessary policemen away from the scene, as to gather as much information from the scene as possible.
As I did get to the town, I was thinking, I'm going to stop now at the chemist, and I'm going to get something to eat, because for 5 days I didn't have any food in my body. And I think a little bit shaky, and I think, I'm going to insure or something by the kid. And a lovely lady did help me. And I said, you know what, they're going to tell me my child is dead.
Hanneke Stadler's worst fears were confirmed. 100 meters from the burnt-out car in the dense forest undergrowth, police finally found her daughter's body. The body was naked, partially burnt, and in the advanced stages of decomposition. It appeared that Victoria had been sexually assaulted and strangled to death. Her neck had been broken.
And I sit there and I think to myself, what the hell am I going to do with my life? Everything stopped here. I live for this child. She's gone.
Andrew Stone is a veteran reporter on the local Daily Dispatch newspaper. The murder of the two young women intrigued him, as well as the dismal quality of the police investigation.
There were reports that police had, not conducted themselves properly at the crime scenes, especially of Jessica Wheeler. I think they probably took the Victoria Stadler murder a lot more serious. It was the second girl that was found. But Jessica Wheeler, there's definitely questions around the way they handled the crime scene.
Andrew Stone was also struck by the similarities between the two killings.
What stood out for me was that nothing was taken from the crime scenes, neither Jessica Wheeler or Victoria Stadler. Victoria Stadler, the police docket still showed that her jewellery was there, I think her cell phone was found, the car radio was still there. To me, if it had been a theft kind of case, then those would have been taken.
Hanneke Stadler's PI was quick to reach a conclusion that set the town on edge.
Both of them were strangled. Both of them were in a similar position, killed within a month of each other. That gave us a clear indication of a serial killer, and that it will happen again, and actually can happen quite soon or every month.
Yeah, we had this media frenzy around the case at the time. So there were concerns that there was a serial killer on the loose.
There was a lot of media coverage on this case. There were people claiming on national TV that there was a serial killer in Knysna. I felt that the people who had made those comments on national TV weren't qualified to make those statements and to create fear in the community of a serial killer.
Pressure was building up in the community, and extraordinary measures were now taken to get to the bottom of the two murders. A state prosecutor from Cape Town was sent down to work on the case. Christinus van der Vyver had grown up in Knysna and knew the town well.
So it was quite a thing for me to go back there and do a case like this. For the little place, picturesque seaside resort like Knysna, it created a bit of panic and confusion.
There was a lot of political pressure to get this case solved, to get a suspect arrested, to calm the community down. Because Knysna became actually like a Wild West. At night it was dead. I mean, the weevils, you're driving down the street and it's like a ghost town. You know, so it affected the economy of the town very much so.
A crack team of detectives was also sent from Cape Town to speed up the investigation into the double murder, while there were now not one but two private investigators busy with their own inquiries into the deaths of Jessica Wheeler and Victoria Stadler. And all parties did not necessarily come to the same conclusions as to who was guilty. But the finger of suspicion was now pointing at a young man who'd been seen with both girls on the nights of their murders.
This is the Stadler girl. She was at the Stones nightclub where she worked. She was last in the company of Heinrich van Rooyen, which was the DJ, and he was the last to see her alive about 2 o'clock in the morning.
The same night that Vicky Stadler had been murdered, we had been in Knysna and we were questioning the DJ at I think it was Stones Club. He was very helpful to us, and now that was the same night when so-called Vicky Stadler had been murdered. So it was a bit strange to us after that. We questioned this guy on the night. You know, if he's involved, is he really arrogant enough to go murder again?
After interviewing literally everybody, you do an inclusion and an exclusion, and you narrow it down. And the only person that must have some information or could be involved in these murders and rapes in both the girls could only be the DJ, Heinrich van Rooyen.
23-year-old Heinrich van Rooyen was arrested by police and questioned about the murder of Victoria Stadler. Soon afterwards, he was charged with the murder of both girls, much to the surprise of his brother and his family.
Die familie, sowel as die gemeenskap, was heeltemal omkant gevang met al hierdie, veral met sy arrestasie. Van die dag toe hulle hom arresteer het, laatmiddag, dieselfde middag, toe hoor ons almal dit op die radio. Toe word daar sommer gesê, die so-called serial killer is arrested.
Heinrich van Rooyen came from the small community of Hornley on the outskirts of Knysna, close to Nutsi Forest where Victoria Stadler's body was found. Over 60% of the population here is unemployed. It's a tough life for most. But Heinrich was earning a good living as a DJ in Knysna's nightclubs.
Heinrich was 'n baie intelligente persoon. Hy was vriendelik en het met almal of enige persoon kon hy kommunikeer en hulle was hom vriende gewees. Verstaan? As gevolg van sy vriendelikheid. Hy was die tipe persoon wat nie eers 'n voeltjie so doodgemaak het nie. Hy was daai tipe persoon.
Hy is 'n vriendelike ouetjie gewees, nog altyd, baie vriendelike persoon. Kom er weg met enige persoon, dan praat ek van enige tipe mens. Hy is 'n tipe persoon, hy pas hom gou aan by die omstandighede waarin hy homself sal bevind. En soos almal weet, hy is 'n tipe van 'n gigolo, soos hulle gesê het. Hy hou van meisies, maar wie hou nie van meisies nie, enige jong man.
Heinrich's father believes in his son's innocence, but up against a high-priority police investigation, he needed help. So he turned to Christian Botha, who was already deep in the case.
We were then contacted by Heinrich's father to see if we could assist to investigate, to establish who was involved with Vicky Stadler's murder because Heinrich had now become a suspect in both cases. So we agreed to take the case on.
There was speculation about a possible drugs link to the two murders. With no apparent port controls, Knysna's become a conduit for criminals trafficking drugs through its tiny harbour into the rest of southern Africa.
There's this underworld in Knysna where there's this drug culture where it seems to draw, I don't know how you say it, but just a different kind of people. You know, you've got on the one side of Knysna, you've got the rich, beautiful, touristy Knysna, and then you've got this sort of drug Knysna that sort of seems to draw people that maybe are a bit rougher.
During our investigation, we could not get clear proof that these two girls were involved in drug trafficking or drug use, although the possibility, after interviewing all their friends, ex-boyfriends, and everybody that knew them and families, that they might have possibly been the occasional users of drugs. We also could not find that they were promiscuous and having boyfriends left, right, and center, and were involved in sexual relationships just with anybody.
When I met Heinrich, I spoke to him. You know, you start getting an idea of a person. Yes, he's outgoing, he's an extrovert, he likes girls. I mean, they called him Don Javon in the newspapers, and yes, he was a womanizer. Doesn't mean he's a killer.
He's a very softly spoken guy, very intelligent, very likable. I actually got on very well with him immediately.
When Heinrich was investigated by us and the police, he was never forthcoming. He never offered his full support. Everything had to be done against him to get everything from him.
I believe there were certain things what we found which proved that there were others involved and not Heinrich van Rooyen.
Our profile of the DJ was one of arrogance, and he was in control, and he specifically had an eye for young white ladies, and which made him, to us, the main suspect then.
Hy het skool gegaan by Knysna, hoor. Is in die dorp, is dit 'n multiracial school. Destyds het die mense gesê dis 'n blanke skool. Skool net vir blankes, maar as ons die jare gaan moes gechange. Dit's 'n multiracial. Hy het verskillende tipe vriende gehad, verskillende rasse. Die mense het so groot ophef gemaak van hy wat net blanke meisies te doen gewees het, maar ek stem nie saam met dit nie, want die meisies wat ek leer ken het hierom is blankes, Africans, verskillende soorte rasse.
Two years after the murders, Heinrich van Rooyen was eventually brought to trial for the killing of Jessica Wheeler and Victoria Stadler. The courthouse in Knysna was packed when he entered the dock.
It was an explosive case that, you know, you had a coloured DJ from a poor part of Knysna, Hornley, accused of murdering two young white girls in one of the most popular tourist towns in South Africa. You know, it had all the ingredients for a massive case, and it turned out that's the way it was. I mean, the media attention, there was media frenzy around it.
Christinus van der Vyver was the state prosecutor. On the other side of the courtroom, advocate Terry Price was defending the accused, Heinrich van Rooyen.
Look, he's a very, very intelligent man. He stuck to his version throughout. Normally when you've been lied to by your clients, you catch them out because you are regularly interviewing them, cross-examining them, questioning them. This guy's version was the same from the first time we spoke to him all the way through, and that's usually an indicator that the person is being truthful. So that impressed me about him.
I've never ever come across an accused in my career that was so self-confident as Mr. van Rooyen. Some may even call it arrogant, but he was very, very self-confident. That's one thing that caught my attention right from the word go.
The court heard that Heinrich van Rooyen and Jessica Wheeler knew each other intimately. They'd been together the night she was murdered.
On the night of Jessica's murder, she was all over Heinrich van Rooyen in the nightclub.
I wouldn't say in a relationship as such, but according to Heinrich, they did have a fling. It had been confirmed from a few friends that there was something between them. What I was told at the time by Heinrich, who made admissions, that he had intercourse with her in the parking lot, against the wall, and it was possibly 2-3 hours before, 3-4 hours before the murder. It was one of the breaks he had as a DJ. So yes, he did confirm that. She then went home.
A pathologist's report said Jessica Wheeler's body showed evidence of forced anal intercourse, and the traces of semen found in her body were from Heinrich van Rooyen. Jessica Wheeler's flatmate then gave testimony. He said Jessica had come home and appeared to be settling down for the night. But while making a cup of tea, Jessica received a phone call.
And she then picked her handbag up and went downstairs. Now, obviously, whoever that person was is the person that she went with.
However, Jessica's phone records showed no such call. Instead, she had received 3 text messages around that time. None of them was listed as from Heinrich van Rooyen.
We did, I think the records of Heinrich's phone were checked. There was no SMSs sent by him. So it was important to find out who sent the SMS.
This was one of the many loose ends that confounded the many investigators on the scent of the killers. Christian Botha testified in court about his findings in the Jessica Wheeler case. The defense wanted to create doubt about Heinrich's guilt by highlighting information from a young car guard, Jaco Kiewicz, who witnessed the argument in the churchyard the night Jessica Wheeler was killed.
You betrayed me. You know it. Now I'm going to be in trouble.
Allegations were made that 2 other people was in fact involved with the murder of Jessica Wheeler, and that there was an eyewitness that saw them in the presence of Jessica, namely Mr. Kiewicz. What happened is when Mr. Kiewicz was called by the defense as a witness during the trial, he completely collapsed during cross-examination. He denied every single word that was said by the private investigating during the bail proceedings that he was supposed or that he was alleging.
I then responded to say, but to me that statement was under duress, as taken by the police.
The court was told that Heinrich van Rooyen and Victoria Stadler also knew each other, and on the night of her murder, she too was enjoying the company of the DJ.
You know, we had spoken to Heinrich, and he had confirmed to us that on that evening he had been given a lift home to Hornley by Vicky Stadler. They had stopped at the entrance of Hornley. There was a library, and they had parked there, and they were chatting in the car. And they didn't have sexual intercourse. He did confirm that she did masturbate him in the car.
We got evidence on record from witnesses that both those girls were all over him. They were dancing with him and they were kissing him. So that doesn't make me suspicious at all.
He then got out the car, she then drove off. That was what he told us.
Heinrich van Rooyen's version of events was a point of conjecture in the court. Certainly, the fumbling police investigation of Victoria's final hours was far from satisfactory.
With Vicky, there was a real bungle up by the police. The car was found, that drew attention because the car was burning. The police were called, the car was found. Then at least, I'm not quite sure, but at least another 5 days went by before further investigation was done and they discovered the body of Vicky. Potential valuable evidence got lost.
And it got worse. It took the police another 4 days after that to discover her pants a few meters away. Crucial evidence which implicated Heinrich van Rooyen.
A semen stain was found on her pants, which matched the DNA of the accused.
which made sense to me because, as I said earlier, she had masturbated him in the car, and any semen she could have had on her hand, she could have wiped it off on her pants. So it did make sense, Heinrich's story.
He gave an explanation why the semen stain was on the outside. So then when we called the expert, she actually testified that it was on the inside, which then also put holes in that explanation of the accused.
Her pants were found, I think it was 3 or 4 days after the crime scene had been closed, was reopened, and those pants were found about 10 meters away from the body. So we were concerned that, you know, when a crime scene is done, it must be done properly. That place must be searched properly before you close it.
Suggestions that the investigating team planted evidence. How on earth would you get a hold of Mr. Van Rooyen's genetic material at that stage to go and plant? You know, I mean, it's ridiculous.
But Christian Botha was still pursuing other leads. He wanted to know if anybody had seen Heinrich van Rooyen and Victoria Stadler together after they'd left the nightclub on that fateful night. A petrol pump attendant claimed to have seen somebody matching her description at a petrol station near Hornley.
She gave us a statement as to what she had witnessed, and she had testified or stated in a commission statement that a white Golf had come in, was after 12, early hours of the morning, with 3 black gentlemen in the car, 1 in the passenger seat in the front, 2 in the back, with a young white girl driving the car. She later pointed out through photographs of Vicky Stadler, and she pointed that the girl who was driving that Golf was Vicky Stadler, according to the photo that she had seen of Vicky. She then gave a statement that put 50 Rand petrol in, and they drove off in the direction of the Nutsi forest.
Christian Botha felt his lead was taking him in another direction, in particular as a 3rd body had been found in the Nutsi forest. Police identified the body of 48-year-old Peter McHelm, lying close to where they'd found Victoria Stadler. In an extraordinary coincidence, a post-mortem showed that he'd been killed the same night as the young woman had been murdered.
The same evening, 900 meters away, another body was found of a gentleman by the name of Peter McCallum. He was sodomized, strangled.
The modus operandi of the murder of that man was very similar to the murder of Istander. And it happened very close to each other. The 2 murders were not far from each other at all.
The defense sort of case rested on the fact that there were 2 men that they believed had killed Victoria Stadler, the second murder.
But the police handled the murder of Peter McHelm as a separate case. The 3 men who were arrested for his murder were known criminals. They were all convicted for his killing.
When you look at the description of those suspects, you think of the description of the petrol pump attendant, of the 3 suspects she had seen with Vicky Stadler.
Again, the defense was alluding to the fact that 4 men or 3 men were seen to get into Victoria's car the night she was killed. And this was after she has supposedly dropped Heinrich off in Hornley.
We were strongly of the belief that those 3 murdered Victoria Stadler as well.
But it was clear it was unrelated, that was their own issue and their own problems and their own reasons why that person was murdered.
When Heinrich van Rooyen testified, he was asked by his defense counsel whether he'd noticed anything unusual when he got into Victoria's car.
And he replied, yes, her car was full of her goods, clothes and goods, because she was moving house. He said the backseat was packed almost to the roof full of her stuff. And he battled to even put the front seat back, which makes me believe that how on earth could anyone else have got into that car? What we subsequently found was Victoria was moving house at the time.
It does create a little bit of doubt in the statement of the petrol pump attendant. But still, I was not there in the car. We don't know what happened in the car. That stuff could have been thrown out the car. She was possibly, could have been under duress at the garage.
And it's just a question that I've never really been answered properly for me. That there clearly could not have been 3 or 4 people that could have got into a car if all her goods were in the car.
That should have been followed up by the police, not just write it off, because there were other people who also gave statements that white Golf was seen with these 3 guys in the car in town. So they had been driving around with her in the car.
The forensic fire report, and we went through it. But there was traces of clothing, but the car was pretty much burned. The fire was able to burn for a long period. It wasn't put out halfway through. It burnt uncontrollably until everything was pretty much gone. So it destroyed everything. Nothing was left.
Christian Botha handed over information from the petrol pump attendant to the police to follow up. But once again, there were complications.
We then got a call, it was about 2 days later, from this witness. And she was scared, terrified. So we went to see her again, and she informed us that after she had given our statement, 2 policemen came to speak to her regarding her statement. And she felt very intimidated by their visit. She was told that, have these private investigators not paid you money to say this?
This evident harassment was not investigated, despite Christian Botha laying a complaint with the police.
The police decided that Heinie van Rooyen was their target, and they simply went after him.
The case was being built around one specific person. Other evidence was not looked at.
There were a few mistakes made in the initial stages of the investigation, unfortunately. There was a warrant which they used for a search and seizure. The state conceded right from the start to say that is not a valid search warrant.
So the court threw the warrant out. Nonetheless, the evidence found at the house was allowed.
The court can, under those circumstances, sometimes the exhibits that were discovered as a result of this illegal search still allow it if it's in the interest of justice.
The police sent the clothing that Heinrich van Rooyen wore on the night of Victoria Stadler's murder for forensic testing. They didn't find any blood, but they did find particles of pollen on his jeans.
The pollen, remember where Vicky's body was found, pollen that was found on his pants, it was in such quantity that you must have been in between those bushes and that specific plant.
That is absolute rubbish. We placed evidence before the court that pollen, those flowers, grow all over the area that Heinie van Rooyen would have had to walk when he walked back home. He'd be walking through that bush in numerous places on his way home, and on top of it, there's a bush just like that at his home. So the attempt by the state, which unfortunately appears to have somehow succeeded, to suggest that pollen came from a specific bush, specific area, with all due respect, is blatant nonsense. Because they had no direct evidence, really, that he killed either of the 2 girls.
There was a person that saw the accused with Jessica in the early hours of that morning, having a discussion. And then there was obviously genetic material of the accused that was found with both the victims.
Yes, it's physical evidence, which is strong in any criminal case. But it could be explained because Heinrich had not denied having sexual relations with both girls.
The 23-year-old DJ was found guilty of murdering both Jessica Wheeler and Victoria Stadler. No clear motive was established, but the judge described Van Rooyen as a Jekyll and Hyde character, capable of being loving and friendly the one moment and a monster the next. Passing a life sentence, the judge said he was mindful that Van Rooyen might strike again. For one of the private investigators who'd worked on this case, justice had been done. But for the private investigator who'd been involved in these murders longest, the judgment was a travesty.
I was there from the beginning. The evidence that we found is evidence that we cannot just push aside. So obviously, this other investigator never spoke to any of the witnesses that we interviewed. So I cannot say why we came to a different conclusion. I can just say what evidence we were managed to obtain.
I had an argument with Christian at that stage, and I said to him, well, bring me the evidence. We've been mandated to do this investigation, to find the murderer of these two girls. Bring me evidence that contradicts my evidence. And he couldn't.
Heinrich van Rooyen is innocent according to information that we managed to obtain during the course of our investigation in Knysna shortly after the murders of the two girls. It is my belief, through evidence found, which should have been tested, could have led to a different outcome to where we're sitting today.
All the other opinions can only be brought to trial if there's facts. So far, and up till now and then, the facts all showed that Heinrich was the killer, the rapist.
Heinrich van Rooyen appealed against the judgment. His appeal was denied, but he pursued his case to the highest court in the land, the Constitutional Court, without success.
Really, I'm quite comfortable with this conviction. And as I say, the court was vindicated by the Supreme Court of Appeal as well as the Constitutional Court.
Ek voel maar net, dit was 'n bietjie onregverdig dat die judge at least, hy kon at least die appeal vir ons gegee het. Om at least ons defense, dat ons advokate hulle kant van die storie voor ander judges kon geplaas het. At least dan miskien sou ons 'n ander wending in die saak gehad.
In 2010, we got a report that a prisoner at a Mossel Bay Correctional Facility had apparently given a statement to a magistrate claiming that he was on the murder scene the night that Victoria Stadler was killed. Now we know Heinrich van Rooyen had been convicted for that killing. claimed that it was 2 other men that he was with that night, and he had actually witnessed them killing her.
Reports started surfacing of someone at Mossel Bay prison who started making mention, or information came out that he had witnessed the murder to Vicky Stadler. The peoples he mentioned who were present, they were the same people who were linked to the murder of Peter McCallum, whose body was found 900 meters away from Vicky Stadler's crime scene.
If it was the other people mentioned, why wasn't there other similar crimes committed afterwards? Once Heinrich was caught, everything went dead and quiet in the Knysna area.
Ek stem nie saam met die feit dat hulle sê dat nou van Heinrich in die tronk is, daar's nie meer sulke moorde nie. As ek reg kan onthou, 'n jaar daarna was 'n blanke meisie vermoor en simpel voorbeeld, haar liggaam was ook versteek onder takke, ook in 'n bebosde gebied.
The prisoner was released from prison. We went down to Knysna, and the idea was to get to him first. It's possible that somebody had made contact with him while he was still in prison, but we then got him to take us through the crime scene and what happened that night. And I say a lot of information just didn't add up.
And we were hoping that something would come out of this, that, you know, they would really look into his and then it came out a short while later that he was lying.
He said he had known Heinrich from before. He said he was a car guard outside the nightclub where Heinrich had worked. He said Heinrich was always good to the car guards and he had wanted to help him.
Years later, the murders of Jessica Wheeler and Victoria Stadler still spark vigorous debate in Knysna. Many people feel that the police investigation was seriously flawed. Unanswered questions still linger. Repeated requests to the police for an interview on the investigations were turned down.
It's a deeply divided town when it comes to the Heinrich van Rooyen murder case. You've got a lot of people who believe in his innocence, and then a lot who are utterly convinced that he's guilty. There's just no grey area in this case. You're either for him or against him.
Some residents believe, however, that the police got their man.
There's no proof that any other party or person was involved. The DNA evidence, the way these murders were killed, the last person to have seen them that had relations with the ladies was Heinrich van Rooyen. So all the information points to Heinrich being the killer.
For the family of the convicted murderer, it remains an outrage.
Almal hoop, soos ek gesê het, die gemeenskap, vir al ons familie, vir al ek, sal nog altyd hoop het dat ons eindig justice sal kry.
There's just so many parts to this case that I think it wouldn't surprise me if the truth did come out eventually one day, showing that maybe there's more to this case than what meets the eye. As I said, we go back to the issue about police not handling the crime scene correctly from the beginning. You know, incidences like that just leave unanswered questions that should never have been left unanswered.
on the 9-1. Switch that over, that's the yacht, I'm blown. I was at the West Coast, now I'm in the East Coast. Shawty wanna